Welcome and thank you for clicking on my video. I want to share something that changed how I think about my work, and that is motivation is not a fixed trait that students either have or do not have. It is something we can shape through how we teach, how we give feedback, and how we design our classrooms. So my central message is captured in the title. When we teach students to attribute their success to effort rather than talent, motivation follows. Today, I will connect four motivation theories to two real students I worked with, and then share four strategies that educators can use in any subject area. Before I get into the theories, I want to ground us in why motivation matters. When students seem unmotivated, we often see the same patterns. They're avoiding challenges, comparing themselves to others, deciding they just aren't good, and giving up after setbacks. It is easy to interpret those behaviors as laziness or lack of ability, but the shift that changed my teaching is this. Motivation is often shaped by what students believe about their ability, efforts, and control. So the powerful part is that beliefs are teachable. When we change how students think about learning, we can change how they approach challenges. Here's a quick roadmap for today. First, I will briefly introduce four motivation theories. I will connect those theories to two students, Laura and Jenny, and then share four motivation strategies that emerge from those experiences and the research behind them. Finally, I will discuss how these ideas will shape my future classroom. Before the stories, I want to briefly introduce the four theories that shaped how I interpreted these students' experiences. Expectation value theory from Eccles and Wakefield explained that motivation depends on whether students believe they can succeed and whether they see value in the task that they're completing. Causal attribution theory from Bernard Weiner focuses on how students explain success and failure, especially whether they believe outcomes are connected to things they can control. Goal orientation theory associated with Carol Dweck and Carol Ames distinguishes between students who focus on learning and improvement versus students who focus on avoiding failure. And then finally, self-determination theory from Dicey and Ryan explains that motivation grows when students experience competence, connection, and autonomy. Keep these four lenses in mind as I introduce Laura and Jenny. My first example comes from my friend Laura. Laura was taking an anatomy class and was struggling with the course. And this was not a new experience for her as she has a history of struggling with schoolwork, and over time she has developed this belief that she simply is just not a strong student. When she talked about her grades, her explanation was essentially, I'm just not smart enough, I cannot pass this class. From an attribution perspective, this was the most discouraging explanation she could have created because it removed her sense of control. If success depends on intelligence alone, then struggling feels like proof that improvement is not possible. My goal was to help her shift from focusing on ability to focusing on strategy. So I suggested that we replace her passive rereading with active recall and self quizzing, and we redesigned her study environment so it was more intentional and consistent. Over time, Laura began saying things like, maybe I didn't study the right way for that test, instead of, I'm just really bad at this. That shift changed the way she saw herself as a learner because she started seeing success as something that she could influence with more effort. My second example comes from a student named Jenny. Jenny was taking a geometry class with me to help her with credit recovery after she failed the course at school. Unlike many of the other students in our classroom who were taking geometry to get ahead, Jenny was there because she was trying to rebuild confidence and fill a gap in her learning. Over time, I noticed that Jenny had started comparing herself to classmates and viewing herself as less capable. Her goal had shifted away from learning and toward avoiding the feeling of being behind. She was also balancing other responsibilities like work and the online course that actually counted for credit, which made it difficult to stay consistently engaged in our class. Instead of focusing on where she stood compared to other students, we focused on her own progress through short term achievable goals. Jenny responded really positively to goal setting. She found that having specific goals helped her stay motivated, also helped her stay organized and keep up with her schoolwork beyond just our class. Her experience showed me that students often need a clear path forward, not just an encouragement to try harder. Before moving into the strategies, I want to highlight the biggest lesson Laura and Jenny taught me. Motivation can be taught. It is easy to think of motivation as something students either have or they do not have. But what I saw with both students was that motivation changed when their beliefs changed. Laura's motivation shifted when she started crediting her strategies rather than fixed intelligence. Jenny's motivation shifted when she focused on her own goals instead of comparing herself to others in the class. Those experiences led me to four ideas that shaped my teaching philosophy, and that is mindset, goals, choice, and belonging. These strategies do not require changing students' ability. They simply change students' beliefs about what is possible. Now I want to move from the stories into the four strategies. The first strategy is changing the story students tell themselves about success and failure. The second is turning large goals into smaller, achievable steps. The third is giving students meaningful ownership of their learning. The fourth is shifting from competition to collaboration. The common thread is that each strategy helps students move away from that fixed thinking and towards the thinking that effort, control, and growth is possible. The first strategy is helping students change the explanations they create about success and failure. When a student says, I'm just not good at math, they are not only describing a feeling, they are making a belief about their ability. Our job is to help students replace that belief with a more productive explanation of maybe I have not found the right strategy yet, or maybe I need more practice with this skill. In practice, this means three things. First, diagnose before judging. A student who is struggling may not need more effort, they may need a better strategy. Second, separate one outcome from a student's identity. A poor grade is feedback, not a definition of who they are. Third, explicitly teach students what they can do differently next time. So with Laura, the turning point was when she stopped saying, I am not smart enough, and started saying, I need to change how I study. That shift gave her something she could actually control. Weiner's attribution theory connected strongly with Laura's experience because the biggest shift was helping her move from an ability based explanation to a strategy based explanation. However, I also learned that changing beliefs required addressing the emotions attached to those beliefs, especially anxiety and frustration. Also, take this into consideration. Students with anxiety or low academic confidence may particularly benefit from process focused feedback. The second strategy is teaching students how to set short term goals that create momentum. Many students have big goals like passing a class, graduating, or reaching some future career goal, but those goals are often too far away to guide daily decisions. Proximal goals break a large goal into smaller, achievable steps. Instead of saying, I want to get better at algebra, a student might say, by Friday, I will correctly solve 10 two-step equations. A strong, short-term goal answers four questions. What am I trying to accomplish? What actions will I take? How will I know I succeeded? What will I do if I get stuck? The reflection afterward is just as important as the goal itself because students learn to ask, what worked? What should I change next time? This is what helped Jenny. One, she focused on her own progress. She regained a sense of control. Pender and Shank work on proximal goals connected strongly with Jenny's experience because the smaller goals gave her immediate evidence that she was capable of making progress. Also, take it into consideration. Frequent, attainable goals can support students with disabilities by reducing cognitive load and providing regular opportunities for success. The third strategy is creating opportunities for students to have meaningful choices. Self-determination theory tells us that students are more motivated when they experience competence, connection, and autonomy. Autonomy does not mean students choose everything. It means students have ownership over how they engage with learning. One way to do this is through choice and how students demonstrate understanding. Students might write an explanation, create a model, record a presentation, or use a visual representation while still meeting the same objective. Another way is providing different ways into the same learning goal so students can find an entry point that works for them. The key is intention here. Too many options can become overwhelming, but a few meaningful choices can increase ownership and motivation. Dicey and Ryan's self-determination theory helped me understand why choice matters. The important part was not simply giving students options, but helping them feel ownership and competence in a learning process. Also consider that offering meaningful choices can increase task value by connecting learning to students' interests, cultures, and experiences. The fourth and final strategy is shifting from competition to collaboration. This strategy is grounded in Carol Ames' work on mastery-oriented classroom structures, which shows that classroom environments communicate what we value. If students believe school is mainly about outperforming others, then struggling becomes something to hide. But when classrooms are built around collaboration, students begin to see learning as something they do with others rather than something they compete for. There are several ways to build this culture. First, design groups intentionally rather than permanently grouping students by ability. Second, give every student a meaningful role so collaboration is shared and every person contributes. Third, recognize growth, persistence, and improvement rather than only the highest scores or the correct answer. A collaborative classroom helps students see classmates as resources rather than competition. So the goal is not to remove challenge. The goal is to create a classroom where challenge feels possible. Also, structured collaborative learning can help create a sense of belonging while allowing students to learn from multiple perspectives. Looking back, the biggest lesson I learned is that many of our assumptions about motivation need to shift. We often think students need more motivation, but students often need better motivational support. We often praise intelligence, but research shows that praising strategies, effort, and problem solving actually helps students develop more productive beliefs about learning. And we often assume grades are what motivates students, when truly lasting motivation comes from growth and from seeing themselves improve and knowing they have control over that growth. These shifts in thinking are the foundation for how I want to approach my classroom. So what will this look like in my future classroom? Students will regularly reflect on their learning, set meaningful goals, and collaborate with their peers. As the teacher, I will provide opportunities for choice. I will give feedback focused on process and strategies, and normalize mistakes as part of learning. Most importantly, I want to build a classroom culture centered around growth, persistence, and belonging. My goal is for students to leave my classroom believing I am capable of learning difficult things and I know what to do when I struggle. Although my experiences come from mathematics classroom, these strategies are not limited to math. Whether students are learning to write an essay, solve a science problem, or perform a skill in PE, students benefit from believing they can improve. So let me leave you with my motivational stance and a challenge. Motivation is not a fixed trait that students walk in with or without. It is something we teach through the attributions we encourage, the goals we help students set, the agency we provide, and the classroom culture we create. Everything today pointed in one direction, moving students from I am just not good at this to I can improve with the right effort and strategy. So my challenge is simple. Choose one strategy and try it. Help a student reframe a struggle, set a short-term goal with a student who is procrastinating, or maybe offer meaningful choices on an assignment, or redesign collaboration so every student has a role. Then watch what happens when students begin to see themselves differently as learners. Thank you. And finally, these are the theories and sources behind the strategies that I shared with you today. Thank you.